Guests of the Nation, Part 4. At last we saw the lantern in the distance and made towards it. Noble was carrying it, and Feeney was standing somewhere in the darkness behind him. And the picture of them, so still and silent in the bogland, brought it home to me that we were in earnest, and banished the last bit of hope I had. Belcher, on recognising Noble, said, "Hello, chum," in his quiet way. But Hawkins flew at him at once, and the argument began all over again. Only this time Noble had nothing to say for himself, and stood with his head down, holding the lantern between his legs. It was Jeremiah Donovan who did the answering. For the 20th time, as though it was haunting his mind, Hawkins asked if anybody thought he'd shoot Noble. "Yes, you would," said Jeremiah Donovan. "No, I wouldn't, damn you." "You would, because you'd know you'd be shot for not doing it." "I wouldn't. Not if I was to be shot 20 times over. I wouldn't shoot a pal. And Belcher wouldn't. Isn't that right, Belcher?" "That's right, chum," Belcher said, but more by way of answering the question than of joining in the argument. Belcher sounded as though whatever unforeseen thing he'd always been waiting for had come at last. "Anyway, who says Noble would be shot if I wasn't? What do you think I'd do if I was in his place out in the middle of a blasted bog?" "What would you do?" asked Donovan. "I'd go with him wherever he was going, of course, share my last bob with him and stick by him through thick and thin. No one can ever say of me that I let down a pal." "We had enough of this," says Jeremiah Donovan, cocking his revolver. "Is there any message you want to send?" "No, there isn't." "Do you want to say your prayers?" Hawkins came out with a cold-blooded remark that shocked even me, and turned on Noble again. "Listen to me, Noble," he says. "You and me are chums. You can't come over to my side, so I'll come over to your side. That show you I mean what I say? Give me a rifle and I'll go along with you and the other lads." Nobody answered him. We knew that was no way out. "Hear what I'm saying," he says. "I'm through with it. I'm a deserter or anything else you like. I don't believe in your stuff, but it's no worse than mine. That satisfy you?" Noble raised his head, but Donovan began to speak, and he lowered it again without replying. "For the last time, have you any messages to send?" says Donovan in a cold, excited sort of voice. "Shut up, Donovan. You don't understand me, but these lads do. They're not the sort to make a pal and kill a pal. They're not the tools of any capitalist." I alone of the crowd saw Donovan raise his Webley to the back of Hawkins' neck, and as he did so I shut my eyes and tried to pray. Hawkins had begun to say something else when Donovan fired, and as I opened my eyes at the bang, I saw Hawkins stagger at the knees and lie out flat at Noble's feet, slowly and as quiet as a kid falling asleep, with the lantern light on his lean legs and bright farmer's boots. We all stood very still, watching him settle out in the last agony. Then Belcher took out a handkerchief and began to tie it about his own eyes. In our excitement, we'd forgotten to do the same for Hawkins, and seeing it wasn't big enough, turned and asked for the loan of mine. I gave it to him, and he knotted the two together and pointed with his foot at Hawkins. "He's not quite dead," he said. "Better give him another." Sure enough, Hawkins' left knee is beginning to rise. I bend down and put my gun to his head. Then, recollecting myself, I get up again. "Belcher understands what's in my mind. Give him his first," he says. "Give him his first," he says. "I don't mind. Poor bastard. We don't know what's happening to him now." I knelt and fired. By this time, I didn't seem to know what I was doing. Belcher, who was fumbling a bit awkwardly with the handkerchiefs, came out with a laugh as he heard the shot. It was the first time I heard him laugh, and it sent a shudder down my back. It sounded so unnatural. "Poor bugger," he said quietly. "And last night he was so curious about it all. It's very queer, chums, I always think. Now he knows as much about it as they'll ever let him know. and last night he was all in the dark. Donovan helped him to tie the handkerchief about his eyes. "Thanks, chum," he said. Donovan asked if there was any messages he wanted sent. "No, chum," he says, "not for me. If any of you would like to write to Hawkins's mother, you'll find a letter from her in his pocket. He and his mother were great chums, but my missus left me 8 years ago, went away with another fellow who took the kid with her. I like the feeling of a home, as you may have noticed, but I couldn't start again after that." It was an extraordinary thing, but in those few minutes Belcher said more than in all the weeks before. It was just as if the sound of the shot had started a flood of talk in him, and he could go on the whole night like that, quite happily, talking about himself. We stood around like fools, now that he couldn't see us any longer. Donovan looked at Noble, and Noble shook his head. Then Donovan raised his Webley, and at that moment Belcher gives his queer laugh again. He may have thought we were talking about him, or perhaps he noticed the same thing I'd noticed and couldn't understand it. "Excuse me, chums," he says. "I feel I'm talking a hell of a lot, and so silly about my being so handy about a house and things like that. But this thing came on me suddenly. You'll forgive me, I'm sure." "You don't want to say a prayer?" asks Donovan. "No, chum," he says, "I don't think it would help. I'm ready, and you boys want to get it over." "You understand that we're only doing our duty," says Donovan. Belcher's head was raised like a blind man's, so that you could only see his chin and the tip of his nose in the lantern light. "I could never make out what duty was myself," he said. "I think you're all good lads, if that's what you mean. I'm not complaining." Noble, just as if he couldn't bear any more of it, raised his fist at Donovan, and in a flash Donovan raised his gun and fired. The big man went over like a sack of meal, and this time there was no need for a second shot. I don't remember much about the burying, but that it was worse than all the rest, because we had to carry them to the grave. It was all mad lonely, with nothing but a patch of lantern light between ourselves and the dark, and birds hooting and screeching all round, disturbed by the guns. Noble went through Hawkins's belongings to find the letter from his mother, and then joined his hands together. He did the same with Belcher. Then, when we'd filled in the grave, we separated from Jeremiah, Donovan and Feeney, and took our tools back to the shed. All the way, we didn't say a word. The kitchen was dark and cold as we'd left it, and the old woman was sitting over the hearth saying her beads. We walked past her into the room, and Noble struck a match to light the lamp. She rose quietly and came to the doorway with all her cantankerousness gone. "What did you do with them?" she asked in a whisper, and Noble started so that the match went out in his hand. "What's that?" he said, without turning around. "I heard ye," she said. "What did you hear?" asked Noble. "I heard ye. Do you think I didn't hear ye putting the spade back in the house scene?" Noble struck another match, and this time the lamp lit for him. "Was that what you did to them?" she asked. Then, by God, in the very doorway, she fell on her knees and began praying, and after looking at her for a minute or two, Noble did the same by the fireplace. I pushed my way out past her and left them at it. I stood at the door, watching the stars and listening to the shrieking of the birds dying out over the bogs. It is so strange what you feel at times like that. You can't describe it. Noble says he saw everything 10 times the size, as though there was nothing in the whole world but that little patch of bog with the 2 Englishmen stiffening into it. But with me, it was as if the patch of bog where the Englishmen were was 1,000,000 miles away, and even Noble and the old woman mumbling behind me, and the birds and the bloody stars were all far away, and I was somehow very small and very lost and lonely, like a child astray in the snow. and anything that happened me afterwards I never felt the same about again. The end.